So when we get started, You get a thumbs up on your.
Like anybody other than you like I don't have too many regular cousins, no time for those, so it's nice to meet new people. I've got 3 cousins total, so anybody else is welcome. Three male cousins.
True. Is that good? Go ahead.
You have issues. It's always nice to have a woman.
Listen to everything outside. They're coming in the front.
Are they coming?
They're back there.
Should I tell my dad to get them? I'm not getting them. I'm hanging out with you.
Okay, and then Grandma.
I know they're around. They're over there. We're not all the way outside still.
Everett.
Are you and I going to together?
What is it?
You want to say the end of the
Or is there not?
Maybe over there. Where should I sit?
Right there, yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure.
I'll go find out. You want to sit there or you have to go over here? We'll watch
He actually played.
You were saying how James already got a draft.
Yeah, I love basket.
That was.
I love basket. I don't know where you're right now we're gonna sit here and then we're gonna sit there and then we're gonna yeah, right now we sit here. Look. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm gonna move there. I'm gonna move there. No, Mom, you never got to move there.
You guys want to down the seat? Defending your property. Just make sure the notes are deep. What was that? Oh, yeah, it was, I think.
It was under there. On the ground. Yes, actually.
All right, we're going to start in just a moment. What do we think? Do we want the shade down? Yeah, I think we do. I think well, why not, right? Do we like that idea?
I guess so.
All right. Okay. We're going to start in just a minute. If anyone, I think we've got a couple more seats. There's a few over here. So if anyone would like to sit. We'll do a little mic check. Is that sounding okay for everyone? All right, we're going to give the shade team just a moment, and then we'll start in about a minute.
Ellis did that. Ellis put all the shades up. No, actually, he did. He put that up.
All right.
Yes, I'm sure. Right, Mom? Ellis put those up. Ellis, you put those shades up, right? Remember you put them all the way up before I put the shades up? No, I put them
Okay, and I see 3 empty seats over here, and I see a scattering of seats over here. So if anyone would like to come join us here in the main room, you're welcome. And there's a few chairs or slots on the bench back there. Okay, are we good? All right, welcome, everyone. We are so happy that you're here to celebrate the life of Nancy Hartman Dickson. For the few of you that I haven't met, my name is Andrew. I'm her oldest of 2, and I'm going to serve as sort of the MC, as it were. But I thought I would start with a remembrance of my own. So my mom was a quietly powerful and influential person. Sometimes surrounded by big personalities, but she just, she had this steady hand. And I think for my part, she was the parent that I got sort of the sense of right from wrong and advice. She was always in my corner, and she was someone I could always turn to. And that was true as a kid, but even as a teenager, into college, into my 20s, into my 30s, even my 40s. I could call her. I called her every week, talked to my parents every week. And halfway through, I sort of let in a little situation that I might need a little help with. And she just had this capacity to help. And I know a lot of you felt that. She loved being there and being in your corner, whether you were family or friends. She even did it with strangers. Every Wednesday growing up, she volunteered for WTOP's Call for Action. So she would spend 8 hours on the phone just helping people figure out tricky situations. So she had this desire to help, but I think she also just loved being with people. The phone was kind of a big deal in our house growing up. It was always ringing. We had to get a second line very early on. So often, my dad was in one part of the house talking to friends, and my mom was in another talking to one of her brothers or a family member. And I think the only thing she loved more than talking on the phone was actually being in community with people. And so our life was really bookmarked by these get-togethers where we would get together with other families here in Garrett Park, and the parents would be in the kitchen or on the deck, and kids would be running around playing flashlight tag, or, we didn't go to DC to go to the Smithsonian. We went to go see friends. We'd go to one of the restaurants my parents had invested in and have dinner. And we would go to Florida, and we'd go to New York to see her oldest friends and their families, and see our extended family. And then, of course, I'm sure we're going to hear about our wonderful summers in Weld, Maine, where thanks to this huge house that we rented every July, one minivan would be coming into the driveway as another minivan was driving away. We really got to spend so much time with friends and family. And I'm so happy that the people who are part of all those experiences are here in this room. You guys are all here with us, and we're going to hear from some of the people who are part of those experiences. So again, thank you for being here. Welcome. And I'm going to bring up our first speaker, someone who was part of all those same experiences, but with his own unique perspective and his own unique relationship with my mom, my brother, Alex.
Hello, everyone. First of all, apologies. I'm going to read this. I didn't get too much prep time. Trying to set up the video and all this kind of stuff. I didn't read over this too many times, so I'm going to be reading. But so say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. Just thanks everyone for coming out and being here today. Everyone's presence, and unfortunately, I wasn't sure how many people would fit in this room in the town hall. So there's people that wanted to come that are watching on the video. But this is, it's a testament to how many people cared about my mom and how many people her and my dad had and continue to have in their life. Thrilled we're just able to do this, how this has come together, because today is allowing us to see so many folks, many or even most of whom I know my brother and I haven't seen in years, sometimes decades. It also acts as a reminder of what a life well lived looks like. It's the connections and impact you've made with others throughout your life that can make it so special. We grew up with a lot of these connections in our house on a regular basis. One of my earliest feelings I have from growing up, and it's less so a specific memory, but it's more of a feeling, was that of lying in bed as I fell asleep, listening to the murmur of people talking, dinner plates or glasses clinking, and laughter coming from downstairs at one of the many dinner parties that my mom and dad used to always have here in Deer Park. It was a tremendous way to drift off to sleep. My mom she was a strong woman. She was dedicated and protective of family throughout her life. Our family vacations were so often tied to family, whether it was to visit her parents down in Florida or visiting my dad's sister and her family outside of New York City, often several times a year. She never missed a game of ours growing up, and there was a lot of them. To make sure she was always there. I'm not quite sure she literally ever missed a single one. My earliest this is a faint memory as well, but my earliest memory of my mom that lingers often, but when she was alive, but also still now, is the time when I was quite young, probably younger than, somewhere in between my two little guys here, James and Ellis. We were in a movie theater, and my dusty memory plays into my head that it was the Uptown Theater down on Connecticut Avenue, which it may or may not be correct. But when whatever movie we were watching ended and the crowded theater exited up the aisles, a hurried man bumped me as he attempted to rush out of the theater. My mom, who was just a step behind me, grabbed the man's arm and let him have it, ensuring he was aware that he had either nearly run over a kid and that's how out of line he was. It was a fleeting moment and a memory that, as I said, is faint, but the fact that I still think of it is the power of the feeling of being protected as a child. My mom raised us with a caring discipline in our house from a young age, with rules surrounded by love. even if I did everything I could as a defiant, at times bratty kid brother, defy that discipline as I grew. And as an adult and a parent of 2 young boys, myself now, I see so clearly how she and my dad did things and raised us the right way. Looking back, I certainly took a lot for granted. For example, she was a phenomenal cook. I have specific memories of complex meals coming out of the oven in a thick recipe box that she'd dive into on a near nightly basis, regardless of whether we had company or not. And yet, unfortunately, I could not have been a pickier eater and took it all for granted and didn't eat a lot of it. But again, as I realized I got older, routinely she cooked fantastic meals on the dinner table on a near nightly basis. What was so impressive about her strength, though, was that it was a quiet strength, not always noticeable. She battled a lot physically for many, many years. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when Andrew and I were both very young, and quietly dealt with it. The subtly disabling effects. MS is something her and I share in recent years, as I was also diagnosed about 15 years ago. We didn't talk about it a ton, as I'm not great about talking about it, but it did bring me a lot closer to her, and seeing how she handled the disease, never acting as if woe was me. She set an example of how to handle its complications with grace. If only that were it. She was a cancer survivor who handled treatments and surgery with a smile and a sense of humor. And for decades, lived with a damaged hand from a subtle accident on a commercial toboggan operation where I was sitting on her lap and she tried to retuck her leg that got jostled loose and flew down the ramp at high speed. She dealt with a lot, but never complained. The last few years were incredibly tough for her, as these ailments made her age faster than was just. Her golden years have been robbed, but her spirit never was. I have regrets about not being the best communicator to her of how I felt about her as a mom. But for everyone here today, just know that she's one of the best. Thanks again for being here today, for sharing in this moment of remembrance. This would have been such a great deal to her. I'm sure she's smiling right now.
Thank you, Alex. And I was remembering all of a sudden growing up that Mom always made 2 salads every night. There was the salad that Dad and she shared, and then there was Alex's salad. Every night. And thank you, Alex, also for setting up this live stream. So I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that there's so many of us here in the room, but we're joined by Stephen and Sassy and Carol, one of my mom's oldest friends in New York. We have people in Boise, in Boston, and Portland, and Richmond, all over the place. But I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge a group gathered in Los Angeles. So my mom had 2 brothers, and her older brother, Charlie, and her younger brother, Dick, and his partner, Leslie, are in Los Angeles right now watching. They're at Erica's house, who's my mom's niece, my cousin, joined by Stephen and Ian, Erica's twins, and actually Alexis and her family flew from Washington State down to Los Angeles so they could all be together. And Susan just got a photo of them all watching. So I wanted to welcome everyone who's not here in this room, but is very much part of this. So staying on the theme of cousins, I'd like to bring up representing Amanda and his partner Sarah, and Chris and Lily, who are watching from Boise, my cousin Peter.
I have 3 pages typed up like Alex, but my style is a little bit more leaner, so I won't be reading, but as a result, I'm setting a timer so that I don't ramble on too much. And it's amazing. One of the things that I will get to here, shortly, I think, and I think will be a theme today, is that plenty of things that Alex mentioned in his speech brought to light tons of memories that I have of Nancy, and I think is really the theme of what I'm going to talk about today. And so when I sat down and thought about what am I going to say, what can I tell people? Of course, my initial intuition was to think about a unique story, some sort of anecdote or other memory that would be really unique and interesting and obviously hilarious because I'd be delivering it. But ultimately, I sat down and I really thought about it, and I thought, I think anything that I'm going to tell today or any memory that I have is actually something that everybody in this room probably has shares in their own way. And while I really wanted to come up with something that was unique and real, some special aspect about her, I came to the conclusion that after thinking about it for a while, that these are all things that I think people in this room will appreciate because I realized that I don't have necessarily some special insight to her. My relationship with her wasn't so specially unique, and I think ultimately that is a testament of who she was. I think everybody here and all the things that I'm going to talk about are things that you all share and you all know because that's really who she was as a person. And I think we've already heard two people talk about her as a steady presence. And I think that really does represent who she was as a person and is a lot of what I remember about her specifically. And I think that that's really what made her special. Her warmth, her spirit were things that came through in all of the things that she did and all the relationships she had with the people in her life. But when I think about some of the things personally that were important to me or special memories, as already been mentioned, the first things that come to mind are two things. One is, family Christmases, where the Dicksons would come up to the New York area to visit my family, my grandmother, Paul's mother, and Alex and Andrew's grandmother. And those early days of spending family together, and those, subsequently went into, when we think about my early childhood, summers in Maine. Obviously, we were very much an integral part of those summers in Maine. We were the car pulling in and out amongst the other minivans. We didn't have a minivan, but nevertheless, we shared the same experience. And I think that house represented so much of who they were as people. It was always welcoming. There were people coming in and out at all times throughout the summer. And it was always a communal experience to be shared and enjoyed by everybody in their lives. And it was amazing to see people come in and out. And the wonderful thing that I think about Nancy today is my experiences with her really ran through a couple very, very formative periods of my life. And so I really do ultimately cherish knowing her as both a young child. I then went back to Maine for summers when it was my elementary school and middle school. So as a growing up adolescent, early teenager. And then ultimately when I applied to and was getting ready to attend George Washington Law School and looking for an apartment in DC, I came down and lived with Paul and Nancy for about a month. And so as a result, I then got to really experience her as an adult or as a emerging adult in my 20s. And it's funny because some of the things that Alex just mentioned that made me think about this was, the work that he did with, speaking with communities and speaking with people. These are things that I didn't realize as a child. You have a very specific and sort of particular relationship when you're a toddler or elementary school child and when you're a middle school and a teenager. And then as an adult to see another side of her, to understand a little bit more about their life as from an adult perspective. It gave me an appreciation that I just didn't have as a child and understood, how much more impressive she was as a person, how many more things she was involved in that as an adult I really came to appreciate. And it's that warmth, it's that indelible spirit that I think she came through in everything she did. And to this day, it's amazing. I'm so grateful to have experienced, her in my life through a couple different, important parts of my life. It gives me perspective and lets me sort of understand her as a whole person. She was an aunt for me as a child, as an adolescent, and as a young adult. And I cherish her role in my life, and I view that she really, the teachings and her legacy lives on for me in so many different ways, as I do assume it does for everybody in this room. So I want to obviously as someone who was, I think, on the toboggan with her at Skytop, the memories that we all share in this kind of environment is great. And it really makes me, every time someone starts to talk about it, it makes me think of something different and something new and an interesting thing that I hadn't thought about in a while. So, again, a real testament of who she was as a person and the impact she had with people around her. And so, obviously grateful to be able to speak today and, somebody who I'm grateful to have had in my life and someone who had an amazingly indelible impact for who I am as a person. And and there's an amazingly formative and talented parts of my life.
So the house that we would go to every summer was called the Beehive, and it was not winterized, and it belonged to the Wests, who were my mom's next door neighbors growing up, and so we got it every single July for the entire month. And part of that experience was, it was definitely about Maine, but we also would sometimes go to New Hampshire, where my dad's aunt lived, Eleanor, and Eleanor and Carlton would sometimes come visit us, sometimes we'd see them, and my mom and Eleanor had just such a wonderful and close relationship. So representing Eleanor and the Abbotts, I'd like to welcome Lance Abbott, who's down from Connecticut, to the stage.
I truly am here representing my mother more than myself, but I certainly have a long history and a lot of memories of Nancy. And I'm already hearing the common thread of the type of person she was. Steady, certainly fits. I appreciated her quietness and her strength. And when Paul and Nancy got married, I was away in college and I didn't really get to meet her until several years after. But at those times in Weld, Maine, when Paul and Nancy were there and my parents lived not far away, every time I had the opportunity to join those gatherings, I got a chance to know Nancy better than I ever had. And clearly, she is an indelible mark on all of our lives. As you just heard, my mother and Nancy had a very close relationship. I think for both of them, that was not uncommon. I'm sure there's a lot of people here that feel the same in their relationship with Nancy. So it wasn't a strange thing. But right now, I'm hoping the two of them want to join the conversation again.
Thank you, Lance. So we're going to get into some friends now, and I think I can tell you exactly when our next guest and my mom met. They met when they were, I think, at a party. I think they were both pregnant with their oldest. My mom with me, and our next speaker, John. So that was, doing the math, 52 years ago. Became immediate and fast friends, and I suspect we might hear a little bit about my mom's also sense of humor, which is starting to come out a little bit as well, in addition to other qualities. So, Peg, come on up here.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that Nancy would be so embarrassed by all this attention. I mean, she would say, she would try to change the subject a lot of times, but you can't. So, I have had a hard time putting some of this into words, and I'm going to be fast. Don't be fooled by these pieces of paper. She was so generous. She was so generous. She was incredibly kind. She was a great listener. She was hilariously funny. She had a really deep interest in, and this is everybody, we're all kind of saying the same thing. She had a deep interest in all kinds of people and what they were up to. She had enormous grace all the time. I kept trying to model that. I was a huge failure. She also had tremendous taste, like food and art, and also I also tried to model that, also a failure. She had a ton of empathy. She was tough. She was fierce, really protective. She asked the hard questions. She totally asked the hard questions in the nicest way, but she asked them. She also looked great all the time, and she looked put together all the time. And I don't know how she could be all those things at the same time, but she was, and she was like that all the time. She was an unwavering presence in my life, in the life of my family, certainly in the life of my kids, and that is Beth O'Brien, who is watching this live stream from Boston, and John O'Brien, who is watching it from Abu Dhabi. So I'm just going to give you a few quick snapshots because that's all I'm good for. One is how we met each other, which actually, your mom was 6 months pregnant with you. John O'Brien was already 3 months old, so I knew everything about motherhood. So really, you're lucky about that, right? So we all met each other and we immediately thought, wow, who are these people? Like, how lucky have we been to like hop in with these people? And so, and that was in 1973, that was 52 years ago, so, or something like, yes, it was 52 years ago. So starting then, we were part of the cast of a lot of the things that these guys have all laid out, right? So we loved each other, we enjoyed each other every time we got together, and Andrew, you mentioned this in your book, I loved your book, which is, it felt like a party, and, you know, Beth O'Brien came along, Alex came along, it all felt like a party. We thought the Dicksons were the party, the Dicksons said we were the party. And we would see each other at the Beehive in Maine, we would see each other at Johnson Farm on Capitol Hill, in Garrett Park, in Cape May, New Jersey, where we spent some time together. At Michael Toledo's opening nights in theaters all over DC. And of course, at the Man in the Green Hat and Colonel Brooks Tavern. So we shared our restaurant investments with them. Beth O'Brien, Colonel Brooks Tavern was very advanced and had a Pac-Man machine.
Yeah.
And exactly. And Beth O'Brien, I don't even know how old she was. She was maybe 8 or 9, and she would say, how does Paul Dickson always have all those quarters? Like he has millions of quarters we could throw into this machine. So, but embedded in all that really fabulous mayhem was the phone, right? So Nancy and I would talk on the phone. We would sort of arrange a lot of these things, but then we would talk about everything. So the second line that was ringing, that was me. I was on that line. And we would talk about all kinds of stuff. We would talk about you guys and my kids, what we were worried about, what we always worry about you guys. Even as adults, we worry about you guys. We talked about what was up with our extended families and with the State of the Union, and we talked about eyebrows. We talked about what you were going to wear. Women, I do believe only women can do this. What you were going to wear. What we didn't talk about almost ever was MS. And because it was very clear that that was not the thing that was driving her life. And that was not what was going to define her. And so that was fabulous. The other thing about a lot of this time that we would be on the phone together, and that was just her and me, and that's what made it so special, right? Because the rest of us was like a circus all the time, which you would never trade. But I would also never trade those phone conversations because they were really special. During that time, part of that time, there was a divorce in my family. I was totally embarrassed about my life and myself, and so I thought, I just got to pull my flaps in and pay attention to my kids, and I don't know, I just felt like I needed to be under my bed for an extended period of time, but Nancy Dickson would not let me do that. And so she would call and say, come on, we're gonna all meet downtown at the museum, and then we're gonna go to dinner with all the kids. And what a gift. So, and I told her that. Of course, she was like, oh, she liked to just all kinds of stuff. She was unbelievable. Last snapshot is this. In August of 2015, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, but Beth O'Brien, though she lived in Boston, was in Washington, and she was 33 weeks pregnant, and it was very clear that this baby, she needed to have this baby right now. They needed to take this baby right now. And it was complicated. It was medically complicated. There were some very hard days. There were some very iffy days. Beth spent time in the ICU. The baby spent a bunch of time in the NICU. And at this point, and then they ultimately came home. They came home to our house in Washington from the hospital, and they stayed with us for several months until they kind of everybody got their feet under them. Nancy, at this point, this was in August of 2015. Nancy, at this point, was walking, I think, without an apparatus, but it was. You could tell that it was slow and painful. In my house, you have to go up a whole flight of stairs before you can even get into my house. So I never really thought about Nancy coming or Nancy and Paul coming. But Nancy said, I'm coming to your house, I'm coming to see Beth, and I want to hold that baby. I want to see that baby, and I want to hold that baby. And so she insisted, she totally insisted on coming, and so she and Paul did. And it was all that grace and empathy and grit and fierceness and resolve and protectiveness kind of all on display at the same time. And I thought then, I'll bet this is the last time that she will be able to come to our house. And I was right about that. But I was so grateful for that. And so you can tell it's hard for me to talk about her, especially in these recent years, without talking about Paul. And there are no words for him in any category, which we all know. Except that for both of them, I have a few words, I have 4 words, which are big love and endless gratitude.
All right, so I love that we've heard so much about New York and well, in May, but we're here in Garrett Park, we're at the town hall, and this community and this place meant so much to her. I think there's only like 200 houses in Garrett Park. My parents lived in 4 of them. That's how much, it was they were always moving. There was never a question that they were going to move out of this. And weirdly, always on the other side of Strathmore. So our next speaker is really part of those early, my childhood. And I can remember Friday nights, sleepovers, but was part of all those nights of flashlight tag and the games. So please welcome Gretchen Howard.
Okay, hello people. Nancy and I met in kindergarten with Andrew and Jeremiah, and that established the relationship that we had. I really can't add too much more than what is said, so I will tell you a little bit that for me, I just admired Nancy for the way she lived. I admired she and Paul for creating such a warm and loving family and sharing them with all of us in Garrett Park. And that family continues to grow, and I think all of us do, the love and concern that they have for us. Nancy, and this has been cited by other folks, Nancy had the ability to relate immediately to people. It didn't matter if you had known her for 15 years. It didn't matter if she had just walked into your life. She absolutely connected in a positive way. She made everybody feel welcome and a part of something greater. With the MS, etc., she always looked forward. She never looked back. She never complained. She never said it was somebody else's problem. She was always at the same time gentle and social, incredibly strong. She, as Pega said, had no interest in talking about her problems. She'd much rather solve your problems. She never complained. I never heard her complain. And the other part I would say for the group is that she is and was a great role model. She extended herself. She didn't let fear enter into her life. She lived life to the fullest. Thank you.
All right, so I remember when my parents moved to their last Garrett Park house, I started hearing about Jenny and Dan, these incredible neighbors, next door neighbors, across the street neighbors. And very quickly, part of the ritual of my family coming out to visit from Portland was an evening with Jenny. So I'm so excited to welcome to the microphone Jenny.
Hi, everyone. I had the great fortune of being Paul and Nancy's neighbor for more than 15 years here in Garrett Park. And a lot of what I'm going to say is echoing what the others have already said. I first got to know Paul and Nancy through my husband, who discovered early on that he and Paul had a shared love of baseball. And so from there, it just kind of grew. We have meals together, sharing this and that. And it just grew into this really lovely neighborly connection where you could just feel comfortable, stopping by. And so I have a lot of memories of Nancy from just stopping by. I'd come over to their house, knock on their side door. She'd be at her computer where she often was. She'd look up and smile and wave me in. And, we'd just sit and chit chat for a little while about whatever. At some point, her kids gave her a digital picture frame, the kind that you can upload photos to remotely. So I would always get the updates on Pearl and Everett, and later on James, and Ellis never made it quite into that as part of the picture, but I came to really, really appreciate how much Nancy loved her family. And, I've always thought that it takes someone to love their own family before they can care about anyone else's. And Nancy always, without fail, asked me about my daughter and what she was up to and what was going on in her world. And I always just really appreciated that. So that's really how I got to know Nancy. Her thoughtfulness, her incredible good manners. I mean, I came to think of her as the queen of the thank you note. If you made a big pot of something and you took some over, you'd get the dish back with a lovely handwritten note from Nancy. If you had them over for supper, or even sometimes, if you took something over to their house when you were invited for supper, sure enough, the next day there would be a thank you email from Nancy. So, having known her, I realized early on that I had to really, ramp up my thank you note game. And throughout all this, and this, is unfortunately a recurring theme here. Throughout, she's really fighting the effects of the MS. She never ever brought it up. She heroically tried to keep life as normal as possible. Even if that meant, if she wanted to sit at the table, she would put the plates on her walker and bring them into the table. And I just admired her so much for that. She just got on with it. And anyway, it was really, I just admire her so much for that. And then just one other thing I wanted to say about Nancy was her sense of humor. She had a very sly, understated sense of humor. Her partner in life could really take up his share of the limelight. but given the opportunity, Nancy could get her licks in, and it could take you by surprise because you weren't necessarily expecting it. So there's this one time, this is just a little thing, but it has stayed with me. I was over at their house, I was talking with Nancy. Paul was in the next room. He was on the phone with someone I knew just a little bit. And, we're talking, and it's very quiet in the room next door, and clear that this person is really monopolizing the conversation. And Paul's not saying anything, which is noticeable. so we're chatting away, and then just in the middle of a sentence, Nancy stops. She looks to the other room. She looks back at me and she says, "Boy, that guy sure can yak." I just thought it was so funny, and I really have Nancy to thank for introducing that great word yak into my vocabulary. So she was a wonderful neighbor. She was a friend. Every time I look out my front window over to their house, which is still the Dickson house, I think of her and Paul. I learned a lot from her and from her example. And, I just will always be so grateful that fate dropped me and my family across the street. So I could get to know her.
Okay. All right, so we've got two more speakers in a song. Our next speaker is someone who had just such a beautifully calm and loving relationship, and someone who so inextricably links with her and me, my partner, my wife, Susan.
So, like everyone here, I love Nancy so much. I'm really honored to be able to share a tribute to her. I've known her over half my life. When I was 24, my new boyfriend invited me to visit his family the week of Christmas, and drove down to Richmond, Virginia, where I was with my aunts and uncles, and my aunts are watching today. I'm so glad to join us. They love Nancy too. Picked me up and brought me back to Garrett Park for the first time. And those of you who live here will appreciate this, every time. But for the first time, seeing it covered with snow like a Christmas card, just a really beautiful, special place. And her welcome was so warm, so generous and affectionate. It was really so nice just to walk into their house and feel so cared for. Of course, she made amazing dinner. But I already knew that she was a wonderful cook because our first Thanksgiving together, a month earlier, each of us called our families and asked for a favorite recipe over the phone. And she shared her dressing recipe with Andrew. So just the two of us in my big 1904 house, that shared house with 5 people, turned out to be just the two of us cooking a huge amount of Thanksgiving food and really enjoying the dressing. We still make it every year. But that was Nancy. She had such an amazing repertoire of food, and her recipes are in our family cookbook, Dickson, some of our favorites. And it's just one of the things that always brings her back to me. So accomplished. She got so much done in a single day. The phone was always ringing, line 1 and line 2, and she was answering emails, and she was making sure that the family enterprise was coming along. She was a literary agent in every sense, except she didn't have an agency. And her call to action work was so meaningful to her, but it was just so understated. She never brought attention to it. She just helped people she knew, people she didn't know. She was so generous in that sense, as so many have said, but it was just such an example of how to live. I'm so lucky because, there's so many jokes and cliches about mothers-in-law, and, Caitlin has the same incredible luck that I do, and that she was wonderful. I just feel so lucky, and not least that we agreed on pretty much everything politically, which is so nice in this age to have that kind of warmth and comfort in your own family, and just to be so appreciative of what a good heart she had and how much she cared for others. When I was asked with a group of my friends to write a craft book together, she helped us with the contract, dropped everything, and looked through it. I mean, it must have been her 50th. Nothing new for her, but she found all these pitfalls that any first-time author knows from the rearview mirror that you can improve on, do better, and get, just all kinds of places that she made that process widen the path for us in such a kind and generous way. Mixed in with the dozens and dozens of Pauls. So it always felt so kind, just the way that she spotlighted others and cared so much. One of our early bonds was that she loved unusual jewelry. She's so stylish. But I had just finished jewelry making school, doing metal fabrication, casting, and making pieces. And so I wrote about her in my first solo book, just how her love of unusual jewelry inspired this necklace. And it's fun, I've seen it pop up a few times in the slideshow. But my daughter and I are both wearing special pieces of hers today. But I always also remember what others have shared, that the phone always rang, and at 5 or 6 o'clock, friends or neighbors would drop by and have a snack or a drink, and it was just always such a welcoming home. The Christmas Eve every year when we were visiting, we get to tag along to the famous Christmas Eve parties here in Garrett Park. She planned our rehearsal dinner in Portland, Oregon to perfection from 3,000 miles away. Every detail was just perfect, and it was all Nancy, as they generously hosted that part of our wedding. Speaking of our wedding, her toast was very loving, but kind of got to the point that she would love to have grandchildren. And I'm so happy that that wish came true. For wonderful grandchildren she adored so much. Seeing her eyes light up as one of them walked into the room to cuddle them, read to them, play games. Alex and Andrew's Playmobil was always scattered all over the living room floor, just living once again. She would play Monopoly and Big Boggle, and she was absolutely so much fun, just chit-chatting, playing, talking strategy, doing puzzles. And then the last visit that we had in her and Paul's home, and she greeted me, she just put her hand to my face and she said, "Oh, Susan, you're the same beautiful young woman you've always been." 26 years after we first met, and she became my family too. And one of the things that made me the most proud is I went back to school for interior design about 2 years ago, and Andrew, I remember, was telling her how excited I was, and she was just like, "Oh, Susan's so talented, of course." But just that faithfulness and belief in all of us who loved her was just one of the things that stays with me, and I'm sure with all of you. So all that I have left to say is just to thank her for being the same beautiful, loving, kind, brilliant, funny, determined, and generous woman that she's always been. And I'm very grateful for one last thing. One of her many talents is that she was very musical. If you remember, music playing in the house, she was always humming. She had a beautiful voice. But, her grandfather was a composer, and then she and her brothers sang at the piano with their parents, and then her son was in bands, and now her granddaughter's voice is exquisite too. So really grateful to be part of that thread, and just to be able to share the things that I really loved most about her today. So thank you.
All right, so I thought I would just take a moment to talk about the grandkids. Ellis, hey Ellis, you made Grammy so happy. You just were the light of her life. James, Alex and Caitlin's oldest, you got to spend so much time with her, and she really grew up. You guys grew up with her. And she loved you so much. My youngest, Everett, you guys just love to sit at the dining room table together and play games and puzzles and play Monopoly. You guys had such a great bond. And now I'd like to bring up her first grandchild, my oldest, Pearl, who had a very special relationship with my mom, and my mom loved hearing her sing. So she's going to sing for us.
I didn't think I was going to say anything because I didn't think I had anything to say, but I think that I do. So I'll say one thing, and you'll get why it's important in a second, but I was born on May 6th of 2008, and that's important because just a little over a week later, my granny and grandpa flew from one coast to the other one. And I don't remember it because I was so little, but thinking about it now, it's just incredible.
And, we took 5-hour flights, and it didn't feel as far away as it was. We try to go every year. But what I remember really the most was just the feeling when we were pulling into the driveway. Just knowing that in a minute or two, they'd help us bring all our bags into the house and we'd just get to talk. And I think that was the best thing, was just getting to talk. And, I could tell her anything. I could tell her when I grew up, I wanted to be an acrobat or an astronaut or anything. But I think what I really wanted was to just be like she was. Which really, how incredible she was, felt so out of reach. Because it was just so unfathomable. And there was a lot that I don't think I understood at that point. And when they stopped being able to fly back over to Oregon where we live, I didn't really question it. And so I'm just, thinking about it now, how wonderfully strong of a person that she was. And me and my mom are both wearing her jewelry now. So I just have that, piece. So hopefully I can sing a little bit. I'm a little, but, I would. That. The other thing was, we used to listen to music all the time. So that's why I thought of this, is she would show me all the music that she liked, and one thing we really had in common was the Beatles. So I thought I would lend that here a little bit. I don't think I'm usually this nervous, but she's a hard person to hold a candle to. So that's a little bit of it. Sorry, it's a lot. Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you're only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbirds singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life, you're only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, into the light of the dark fly. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you're only waiting for this moment to arrive. You're only waiting for this moment to arrive. You're only waiting for this moment to arrive.
So we've got one last speaker to go. And as much as this is a celebration of my mom, it is also a celebration of the life and partnership she had with my dad. So this is a celebration, so I just thought this is a little unconventional, but can we make a little noise for Paul Dickson? I'm not sure, yeah.
You got it. This is the proof. I'm actually 85 years old. Relax. So, that was remarkable. Thank you so much for that. I forgot that one. I'll tell you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here to celebrate the life of my wife, my partner, my greatest adventure. Nancy, adventure? You bet. When you're a young boy born in 1939, at the tail end of the Great Depression on the eve of World War II, you grew up and dreamt about action and adventure. You wanted to be Robin Hood, not the sheriff of Nottingham, the roadrunner, not the coyote. As I grew older, I took stock of the world around me and decided I wanted to live life on my own, embracing my restlessness as a virtue rather than a liability. Admitting to being a square peg in a world of round holes, I decided pretty early if I wanted a life of adventure, the best way to pull it off would be to become a writer. As I grew older after college, 3 years as a naval officer and nearly 2 years in Europe, I sort of knew what I was looking for in a mate. Someone unaffected by, unafraid of risk, someone not wedded to a 9-to-5 job, someone primed for adventure. Then I met Nancy in the spring of 1966. It was a blind date in New York City where we were both living. Her roommate, Nancy Akers, who's here now, and my roommate, Bob McLaughlin, a college buddy who's watching on the streaming, they decided that each of them could get our roommates together. So it was the perfect blind date, and the date itself becomes sort of a microcosm of the life we were going to lead later. It started out with biking in Central Park, get hot dogs, curbside hot dogs for lunch. In the afternoon, the Museum of Modern Art, looking at Guernica and all the other things, that wonderful things there. Moving back uptown to our apartment, which is up here at Columbia University, I have paella. I come back from Spain with a gold bag worth of saffron, and so we didn't show up when they paella. And then we went to a dive bar up near Columbia where there was it was really, feet stuck to the floor, and they had these paper mache palm trees next to the dance floor that were festooned with globs of dust. And then we went to a party, sort of an opera party. A friend of ours, who at that time was very much involved in civil rights, a civil rights activist at Columbia University, and we got him home. And so the whole date was, I used to call it the 11-hour date. It probably was closer to 12 or 13 hours. And it was everything went right. In fact, at one moment, I probably did something more heroic than anyone did in the Navy, but little kid was biking, and a little kid got on his bike and started, probably a 2 to 3 year old toddling over, was going towards that lane that goes through Central Park. And I just instinctively jumped up and grabbed him by the pants and, pulled him back and handed him to his mother. It's almost like, the dream date where you imitate a superhero or something. And the date was perfect. Every way, perfect every way. But still one of the greatest days of my life. Jeannie should have attested that. That was one of the great days of whatever. But it didn't. It wasn't the moment for me. It took a little. The next thing that happened, it wasn't the moment we clicked. But at the time, I was singing another one, and guys are singing this other woman, and And she really wanted, there was a thing with Barbara Harris and David Wayne. It was this great performance at Lincoln Center of Showboat. And they actually had a replica of a boat come on stage, but there's only 126 performances. So I was begging to get the ticket, this other woman to that. And of course, I got the ticket, and then she had to go out of town, so what do I do with this ticket? So I called Nancy. So we had dinner, and all of a sudden, during the overture, and this is old school to think this way, but Cupid arrived, and boing, and by the curtain call, we knew something was going on, something serious, and it was that quick and that simple, and so they were so fast forward, April 14th, 1968, we got married. Our marriage was anything but ordinary. It was a partnership built on love, yes, but also shared sense of adventure. We were always chasing something new, a project, an idea, a place to explore, a place to live, a detour to take, a restaurant to invest in, you name it. We were just ready for anything, and we were getting away with murder. In the we didn't have to kill anybody. But Nancy was my first editor, my toughest critic, my greatest supporter. She had an uncanny ability to see the heart of things. From the start, our lives pushed the envelope. We had jobs at first, but soon left them behind as I went freelance, and Nancy joined me part of the freewheeling package that was our marriage. We traveled to Europe for a book on the future of the workplace, across the country for a book on think tanks, everywhere you could imagine for a book on ice cream. Nancy embraced this life of adhocracy. You know, just everything was ad hoc, which we call it an adhocracy. Whether it was tasting peach ice cream at lunch or helping me edit my book on the Vietnam War later in the day. Every so often, we look at each other, smile, and marvel at how much fun we were having. Sometimes we felt like, cover your ears. Sometimes we felt like delinquent kids playing hooky from the real world. So that, Then came motherhood and that great adventure. She was a great mother. She adored her boys. Andrew and Alex, otherwise known as the Nancy Straight A's, as my mother used to call them. I see these boys now as men with families of their own who seem to have taken some of Nancy's greatest strengths and characteristics. They are adventurous, kind, and devoted to their own families. They are men who determined to live life on their own terms. Nancy was as proud of them as any mother could ever be of her adult children. And as for her daughters-in-law and her grandchildren, she was as happy as you could have ever imagined, even in her latest hours of her life. It was just a very, so important to her. But the boys were just wonderful for her and for me. As a family, we built a life here together in Garrett Park, a town that Nancy and I first fell in love with after reading about it in the Evening Star newspaper. Over the 47 years as Garrett Parkers, we lived in 4 different houses, each one a chapter in our story. Nancy had a gift for making a home not just a place to live, but a place filled with warmth, laughter, and love. She was the heart of our family, the glue that held us all together. And when a problem arose, she always seemed to think her way to a solution, while I watched in admiration. Nancy was beautiful, not just in appearance, but she was stunning with piercing eyes and a smile that lit up her own. She was beautiful in the way she moved through the world with grace, curiosity, and unshakable kindness. She had a way of making others feel seen, heard, and valued. And she was beautiful, you bet. There's a story I love to tell about Nancy's beauty and, well, my holiness. Years ago, we were at a party, and an acquaintance who didn't know Nancy saw us together. I noticed him scowling at me during the party, but thought nothing of it. Later, after he'd gotten to know me, Nancy, he confessed that he was so upset at seeing a beautiful woman with me that he'd almost called my wife to report that I was stepping out with a beautiful dark-haired seductress. He couldn't believe someone as stunning and graceful as Nancy could be my wife. I've always taken that as the highest compliment. Not just to her beauty, but to the reminder to myself that she shows me an uncountable number of flaws and all. She taught me what it means to love somebody, not just the easy moments, but the hard ones too. Today I am still grieving, and until the day it's all over for me. But almost every time I think of her, I'm more likely to smile than frown, because the memories of her are so sweet, so filled with the joy of living. Often, we would come home from a dinner party and Nancy reviewed my behavior. For reasons obscured by time, right now she'd be saying, "You don't pull up your pants when you talk." She'd say, for reasons obscured by time, whenever she wanted to call me out, she called me Harry. She said, common review after we go out to a dinner party, she'd say, "Harry, you're so interesting," or "Harry, you're so funny, but you're an interesting guy, or you're a funny guy, but you talk too much." So I'm taking her advice today. And I will ask you here to all to remember her for her goodness, her smile, her courage, and her sense of adventure.
And with that, let's celebrate. We're going to put out some food and some drinks, and we encourage you to stick around. Nancy's going to be putting it all out by himself, so no one needs to help. But again, we're so happy that you're all here, and we don't have to go anywhere anytime soon. So please stick around and come say hi. And again, thank you all so much for being here.
Great.